On our last episode, we began looking at one of the most popular arguments for Islam. In fact, in our time, it is the most popular argument that Muslims use to try to show that Islam is true. So, as we saw last time, when we look at the Quran, so when we look at the arguments that are laid down in the Quran for Islam, they're very strange arguments. You have what I've called the argument from literary excellence, which is basically the Quran is so wonderful and masterful in its eloquence that it must be the Word of God, which is, I'm just going to say it, it's one of the worst arguments ever offered for anything ever. Again, that would be like saying that Mozart's music is so wonderful that it must be the music of God. It's like saying that Eminem's raps are so good that they must come from God, or the plays of William Shakespeare are so good that they must come from God. That's the sort of thing that the Quran is saying, and beyond that, we know that it's just not true. This is a very, very unimpressive book, and let me give you an example, just to give you an idea of how odd this argument is. I'll go ahead and read an entire chapter of the Quran. You can turn to the end and look at some of the short ones. But let's look at one. Chapter 109 of the Quran. Say, O ye that reject faith, I worship not that which ye worship, nor will ye worship that which I worship. And I will not worship that which ye have been wont to worship, nor will ye worship that which I worship. To you be your way, and to me be mine. The claim of the Quran is that is so amazing and wonderful, it must come from God. It couldn't have come from a human being. And here Muslims will say, well, in the Arabic, but that doesn't change the argument. What is that chapter in Arabic? It's just a series of words put into a certain order to convey some kind of meaning. The problem with this argument is human beings can put words in any order. There's no order of words that a human being could not put those words into. So it's a silly argument to say only God could put these words in this order, and yet that's the main argument of the Quran. That is the main argument that the Quran uses to show that it comes from God. Again, worst argument, one of the worst arguments ever offered for anything ever. That's one of the arguments of the Quran. The other main argument that Muhammad used was the argument from biblical prophecy, that there are biblical prophecies which point to him. The problem here, of course, is that according to the Bible, Jesus died on the cross for sins, rose from the dead, and claimed to be divine. And that completely contradicts the message of Islam. Islam says Jesus didn't die on the cross, he didn't rise from the dead, and he never claimed to be divine. So how would Muhammad point to the Bible as some sort of confirmation when the Bible completely contradicts the message of Islam? According to the Bible, Muhammad is a false prophet. Anyone who rejects the gospel or presents a different gospel is a false prophet. So how can Muhammad point to a book and say, that's the book that shows that I'm a prophet, when if we actually go to that book, he turns out to be a false prophet? So these are the sorts of arguments you're dealing with if you go to the Quran. And it's no coincidence that Muhammad's teachings, while they spread among the pagans, weren't nearly as popular among people who actually knew the Bible, because they never would have fallen, or you would have to not know much about the Bible in order to fall for that. So there are Christians and Jews who fall for that argument, but they're certainly not people who know very much about what the Bible says. And even the argument from literary excellence, Muhammad won very few followers using this argument. You say, well, how did Muhammad get so many followers? That's when his argument changed to, hey, join me and we'll go split up the spoils of war. We'll seize property, and we'll take women captives as our sex slaves. And if you die, you get virgins in paradise. That's when Muhammad's message started spreading very rapidly. Before that, he was winning followers here and there, but certainly wasn't very popular. So the arguments that Muhammad used to show that Islam is true just weren't persuasive. He started winning the followers through force, by the sword, by winning spoils of war. That's when he had these sort of mass conversions. So it's no surprise that Muslims today are trying to go in a different direction with their arguments. And the direction that we talked about last time is that Muslims are claiming that Islam is confirmed by science, that science confirms Islam, that Muhammad knew things that were centuries ahead of his time, that no one could have possibly known back then. And so the only explanation for how Muhammad knew these things is that God told him. And since God is telling him these things, then Muhammad must be a prophet and Islam must be the truth. Now, I've never met anyone who bought this argument, who accepted this argument after carefully studying what Islam actually teaches about science. And I think the reason that is because the Quran is a scientific catastrophe. It's a disaster. Last time we looked at Muhammad's claims about the universe. And at the end we sort of put together an outline, but here's an outline of Muhammad's universe. This is the universe according to the Quran and the greatest interpreter of the Quran, who is Muhammad himself. And what we have, this is the universe. There are 7 earths. All of them are flat. They're stacked on top of each other like pancakes, except there's a long distance in between each one. So there's space in between each of these flat earths that are, really huge. Out on the edge of the top earth, that's our earth, is a pool where the sun sets. The sun sets in this pool. There are also 7 heavens above the earths that are like domes that will fall on us if Allah doesn't hold them up. In the lowest heaven, so the lowest dome, this is where the stars are, but stars are missiles that God uses to hurl at demons when they try to sneak into heaven to listen to something. And all of this is sandwiched in between a giant fish and 8 giant goats, each goat which is as tall as one of the heavens. This is the most absurd view of the universe anyone could possibly come up with, and that's what the Quran and Muhammad's companions taught about the universe. So if science somehow confirms Islam, where is the confirmation? Where does Muhammad make a statement that he couldn't have known? Anytime he speaks of something that ordinary people wouldn't have known, he gets it wrong. He gets it wrong every single time. So how does this confirm it? But we only looked at one issue last time. That's Muhammad's view of the universe. Right now we're going to take things in a different direction and look at Muhammad's view of human reproduction, because we have statements in the Quran, we have statements in the Hadith. Muhammad's going to tell us a lot about human reproduction, how the entire process of human reproduction. Let's take a look. Chapter 86, verses 5 through 7 of the Quran. We read, "Now let man but think from what he is created. He is created from a drop emitted, proceedings from between the backbone and the ribs." Here he's talking about a drop of semen or sperm. He says, let man think what he is created from. He is created from a drop emitted, so a drop of sperm emitted, proceeding from between the backbone and the ribs. According to Muhammad, semen is formed between the backbone and the ribs. So between your back, the backbone, your spine, and your ribs. That's in this area. Is this where semen is formed? No, it's not. That's not the job that's going on anywhere in here, right? So now Muhammad didn't know this. He thinks this is where semen is formed and it eventually comes out. But that's just totally wrong. So even here on the first step of semen production, Muhammad's getting it wrong. Let's see what else he says. Sahih Muslim number 608. Man's discharge, sperm, is thick and white, and the discharge of a woman is thin and yellow. So notice, women have a kind of sperm too, and man's discharge is thick and white, and the discharge of women is thin and yellow. So there's a difference between them. Now, that's just false. If he's talking about human reproduction here. Women don't have anything that's like semen or sperm. Women have an egg, an ovum, and so they're very, very different. It's not a thin yellow fluid. So Muhammad's getting the most basic elements of human reproduction. He's getting them wrong. But let's go further. Sahih Muslim number 3328. Salama said, "O Allah's apostle, Allah does not refrain from saying the truth. Is it obligatory for a woman to take a bath after she gets nocturnal discharge?" So a wet dream, as men get. And he said yes, if she notices the water, i.e. the discharge. Salama smiled and said, "Does a woman get discharge?" So she's asking him, do we get discharge or nocturnal emissions like men do? Allah's apostle said, then why does a child resemble its mother? Notice, she asks, do we have something like you men have, that is semen? And he says, of course, because sometimes the child resembles its mother. So you must have a discharge that's similar to the semen in a man, because sometimes a child resembles its mother rather than its father. So we know why a child resembles its father. It's got something to do with what the man is doing. So obviously women are the same, and they're not. They're not. Because Muhammad is relating all of this to some sort of nocturnal emissions that's, again, like what most people would call a wet dream. Men have that, women don't, right? Because women don't have that sort of thing. They have an egg, an ovum. So Muhammad, once again, is getting everything wrong. Sahih Muslim, number 3329. Allah's apostle said, Gabriel has just now told me of the answers. So someone asked Muhammad 3 questions. And he said that, only a prophet could know the answer to these questions. And one of them was about why a child resembles the father's family sometimes, and why the child resembles the mother's family sometimes. And Muhammad he claims that he got the answer from the angel Gabriel. He says, as for the resemblance of a child to its parents, if a man has sexual intercourse with his wife and gets discharged first, the child will resemble the father. And if the woman gets discharged first, the child will resemble her. On that, Abdullah bin Salam said, I testify that you are the apostle of Allah. Now think about this. One, Muhammad believes that there is, men get a discharge, so men have an orgasm and then there is a discharge. And he believes that women are the same. They have an orgasm and then they release their fluid, which is similar to semen, except the semen of a man is thick and white and the semen of a woman is thin and yellow. And whoever has the discharge first, that's who the child will resemble. If you've taken any sort of biology class, you know how absurd that is. The woman's egg is not like that. She's not having sex and then the egg is released. The egg has already been released, right? The egg has been traveling a long time inside the woman, and when the man is releasing his discharge, the egg has already been traveling. So this is completely wrong, saying, oh, whichever parent has discharge first, that's who the child's going to resemble. This is nonsense. It's completely wrong. And notice, he's saying he got this from the angel Gabriel to prove that he is a prophet. And this man, who obviously knows nothing about human reproduction, says, I testify that you're a prophet. You couldn't have known this. And so what we have here is Muhammad would just seem to answer these questions, claim that he's getting them from the angel Gabriel, say them with complete confidence, and a bunch of people who are gullible and don't know any better are claiming that he's a prophet based on his amazing knowledge. But we find out that he's completely wrong. And so these people were converting based on nonsense, complete nonsense, that we now know is false. So my question for Muslims who want to tell us that Islam is the truth, what do you do now? These are the teachings that supposedly confirmed Muhammad as a prophet, and we now know that they are false. So if these are the things that were supposed to confirm Muhammad as a prophet, and they're wrong, why should we accept Muhammad? Especially when you say that we should accept Muhammad because of his amazing scientific insights, which are all wrong. I'm confused here. And it just sounds like there's a lot of deception going on from Muslims who actually know what Islam teaches. In other words, from your actual scholars who know what the Muslim sources say. When they say that Islam is, has all these scientific miracles, I think they're being deceptive, because if you've read this stuff, you know this is just nonsense. And so that's the scholarly types. They have to know that they're spouting nonsense if they've read this. And other than that, you have your average Muslim on the street who's never read any of this, who just thinks that Islam contains all these scientific miracles because that's what his leaders have told him. He's never actually examined the Quran, has never actually examined the Hadith, has just assumed that his leaders are telling him the truth when they're not. And then you're running out saying, oh, Islam is confirmed by science. Well, Muhammad's getting everything wrong. And the revelations that are supposedly coming from the angel Gabriel, think about that. Muhammad says he got that explanation, that whichever parent has the first discharge, that's who the child's going to resemble. Muhammad says he got that from the angel Gabriel. That's the same angel where he's supposedly getting the Quran. Now, go into biology class and tell your teacher this is how it really works. If you believe Muhammad's a prophet, go into your biology class and say this is how reproduction actually works. This is why a child resembles one parent over another. You'll get laughed out of class. You'll fail the class because we know that's wrong. Scientifically, that is false. But that's what Muhammad says he got from the same source as the Quran. If this is obviously false, and that's where Muhammad is getting the Quran from, doesn't that mean this isn't really coming from God? It certainly isn't coming through the angel Gabriel. That's how it looks to me. Sahih Muslim, number 614. Muhammad said, the reproductive substance of a man is white and that of a woman yellow. So he's back on the white and yellow discharge. And when they have sexual intercourse, and the man's substance prevails upon the female's substance, it is the male child that is created by Allah's decree. And when the substance of the female prevails upon the substance contributed by the male, a female child is formed by the decree of Allah. So now Muhammad is actually explaining how the sex of a child is determined, whether the child will be male or female. Does he get this right? Let's look. The reproductive substance of a man is white, that of a woman is yellow. When they have sexual intercourse, the male's substance prevails upon the female's substance. So the male's substance sort of overpowers the female's substance, then the child's going to be male. But if the female's substance prevails upon the male's, then the child will be female. Is that right? If you've taken Biology 101, you know that it's the male's semen that determines whether the child is male or female, right? Because the woman only contributes an X chromosome. The male can contribute an X or a Y, depending on which individual sperm reaches the egg. So it's the male's substance that determines the sex of the child, whether the sex is male or female. The egg doesn't determine that. So this is completely wrong. Muhammad is explaining why a child turns out male or female, and he gets it wrong. He thinks, oh, it's the woman, if her substance prevails, then it'll be a woman. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's a good guess. I can understand why he would think that, but it just turned out to be false. And yet, this is the prophet who is confirmed by his amazing scientific insights, which, again, are all wrong. Chapter 22, verse 5 of the Quran. Consider that we created you out of dust, then out of sperm, then out of a leech-like clot, then out of a morsel of flesh, partly formed and partly unformed, in order that we may manifest our power to you. So now we have a sort of sequence. Man is originally created out of dust, then is created out of sperm. So once a man is created, then new human beings are created through sperm. So we created you out of dust, then he gives us the sequence of embryonic development, the development after the sperm. It says, then out of sperm, then out of a leech-like clot. There's no clot involved here. There's no clot in the stages of embryological development. Then out of a morsel of flesh, partly formed and partly unformed, in order that we may manifest our power to you. Let's look at a couple more passages because he's going to explain what all of this means. Chapter 40, verse 67. It is he who has created you from dust, then from a sperm drop, then from a leech-like clot. Then does he get you out into the light as a child. So we have the sequence. A couple more. Chapter 23, verses 12 to 14. Man did we create from a quintessence of clay, so that's the original man. Then we placed him as a drop of sperm in a place of rest, firmly fixed. Then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. So the sperm turns into a clot of blood. Is that true? No. It's not how it works. Sperm does not turn into a clot, a blood clot, but that's what Muhammad thought, and that's what the author of the Quran thought. So if you're saying that Allah is the author of the Quran, you're telling me that Allah doesn't know that human beings don't go through a blood clot stage when they develop. So we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of that clot we made a fetus lump. Then we made out of that lump bones and clothed the bones with flesh. Then we developed out of it another creature. So blessed be Allah, the best to create. So you have the development there. Notice you have the sperm becomes congealed blood, then it becomes a lump, then out of that lump bones, and then the bones are clothed with flesh. That's false. That's false. Bones and flesh are forming at the same time. So this sequence here is just wrong. Sahih Muslim 6397, Muhammad said, Allah, the exalted and glorious, has appointed an angel as the caretaker of the womb. And he would say, my Lord, it is now a drop of semen. My Lord, it is now a clot of blood. My Lord, it has now become a lump of flesh. And when Allah decides to give it a final shape, the angel says, my Lord, would it be male or female, or would he be an evil or a good person? Notice here, Allah only decides male or female, which sounds to me like he contradicts what he says earlier about the substance of the man or the substance of the woman prevailing and deciding the sex. But if we want to harmonize those, we say that the substance of a man or a woman eventually, when Allah decrees, after everything else, eventually prevails, and that's when the sex of the child is determined. But notice what he says here. It's now a drop of semen, then it's a clot of blood. Again, that's false, but that's what the Quran says. Now it has become a lump of flesh, and when Allah decides to give it a final shape, the angel says, my Lord, would it be male or female? So the sex of the child is determined after everything else. There's the semen stage, then the blood clot stage. Now it's a lump of flesh. And it's only then, after all of that occurs, that's when it's decided whether it's a male or a female. Is that correct? No. As soon as the sperm enters the egg, it's decided whether it's a male or female. That's at the very beginning of the process. So again, Muhammad is getting everything wrong. Sahih al-Bukhari, 3208. Allah's apostle, the true and inspired, said, the matter of the creation of a human being is put together in the womb of the mother 40 days, and then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period. So now he's actually giving us a timeline here. He's actually giving us some numbers to work with. So there's 40 days put together in the womb for 40 days, then becomes a blood clot. So remember, it's the sperm stage, then it becomes a blood clot. Well, if that initial stage before the blood clot is 40 days, that means for 40 days it's just the semen. It's just the semen sitting inside the woman mixed together with the male semen and the female semen sitting together. And only after that it becomes a blood clot. Is that right? Is there a 40-day semen stage? No, that's completely wrong. He's getting it wrong. He's getting everything wrong. And only after that there's the blood clot stage. So this is demonstrably false. Again, go in your biology class and say, hey, for 40 days there's the semen stage. That's wrong. It's wrong. You'll get laughed out of class. You will fail biology if you believe this. But so any of you Muslims out there, if you're going through biology or you're going through med school, what do? Your prophet got everything wrong. And this is what's supposed to confirm him as a prophet. So putting all of this together, right, just like we put together Muhammad's view of the universe, now we can put together Muhammad's view of reproduction. Muslims tell us it's Muhammad's amazing scientific insights in the Quran and the Hadith that show that Islam is true. Putting all of this together on Muhammad on human reproduction, we have semen forms between the backbone and the ribs. That's false. Then it joins with the female semen. That's false. And whichever one is discharged first determines which parent the child will resemble. That's false. The child spends 40 days as a drop of sperm. That's false. Then the child spends another 40 days as a clot of blood. That's false. Then the child becomes a lump. That's false. Then the child becomes bones. That's false. Then the bones are wrapped with flesh. That's false. And after the final shape is determined, God finally decides whether the child will be male or female. That's false. The only thing Muhammad gets right here is that human reproduction has something to do with sex and it has something to do with semen. That's it. Everything else is wrong. He gets everything else wrong. So the only things that Muhammad gets right are the things that anyone could have told you. Everything else he gets wrong, and yet science somehow confirms Islam. So we've looked at Muhammad's view of human reproduction. We have a few minutes left, so let's look at one final topic in the area of science and Islam. We'll look at Muhammad on disease and personal hygiene. Muhammad's going to give us some insights on disease and personal hygiene. In the Quran, chapter 4, verse 3, says that Muslims can marry up to 4 women. in Surah 4, verse 24, and many other passages, we find that Muslims are allowed to take female captives and to have sex with them. So you have your 4 wives, and you have your captives that you captured when you went out in battle. You fought in a town. You took the women captive. Think about this. You can have female slaves, female captives, and your wives. I'm going to point this out. Monogamy is the best defense against the spread of sexually transmitted disease. The more people you're having sex with, the more you're going to spread disease. So you go and attack a town. You beat the town. You defeat the town. You take some captives for yourself. You don't know what diseases those women have, and you have sex with them. Now you've got the disease, and then you go back and you have sex with your 4 wives. Now all 4 wives have the disease. The other women have the disease. You have your wives. You're having your children, and they have children. Now the children have the disease. This is horrible. This is a horrible practice. And yet this is laid down in the Quran itself. But Muhammad also gave us plenty of teachings on personal hygiene and the spread of disease. Sunan Abu Dawud, number 67. I heard that the people asked the Prophet of Allah, water is brought for you from the well of Buddha. It is a well in which dead dogs, menstrual cloths, and excrement of people are thrown. The Messenger of Allah replied, verily, water is pure and is not defiled by anything. These people want to wash up with some water from a particular well, but it's not a well with clean water in it. It's a well that's used as a garbage dump. And so they say it is a well in which dead dogs, menstrual cloths, and excrement of humans is thrown. Muhammad, should we be using this water and rubbing it all over ourselves? Muhammad says, water is pure and is not defiled by anything. Is that true? Do you believe that? Use some water with dead animals and human waste thrown in it and use that and rub it all over your body? You think that's good? That's what your prophet says, if you're a Muslim. Do you believe him? I'd like to see you go and carry this out. Actually, I don't want to see you do this because you could die from following your prophet here. Sunan ibn Majah, number 520. It was narrated that Jabir ibn Abdullah said, we came to a pond in which there was a carcass of a donkey, so we refrained from using the water. No, notice, that's smart. You got a little pool of water here. You got a dead donkey floating in it. Don't drink that. Don't drink it. So we refrained from using the water until the Messenger of Allah came to us and said, water is not made impure by anything. Then we drank from it and gave it to our animals to drink, and we carried some with us. So we weren't going to drink that dead donkey water, but Muhammad came along and he said, it's fine, drink all the dead donkey water you want. What's amazing is Muslims don't believe this. Muslims can only survive because they don't follow this, and yet they're not following things that their prophet said because they know they're wrong. They know these things are wrong. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 5782. Allah's messenger said, if a fly falls into the vessel of any one of you, let him dip all of it into the vessel and then throw it, the fly, away. For in one of its wings there is a disease, and in the other there is a healing or antidote for the disease. So, according to Muhammad, if a fly, which may have just been crawling on human waste or animal waste or something like that, may have diseases all over it, if it lands in your food or drink, dunk it all the way in, because even though one of the wings has a disease, the other wing has the cure. So you want to get all that cure off that fly so that you don't get sick. Is that true? No, that is ridiculous to say that, oh, this wing has the disease, this wing has the cure for the disease. Musnad Ahmed. Muawiyah said, I saw the Prophet sucking on the tongue of the lips of Al-Hasan, son of Ali, may the prayers of Allah be upon him, for no tongue or lips that the Prophet sucked on will be tormented by hellfire. So Muhammad is sucking on the tongues of his young relatives. But think about this, putting all of this together. You wash up in a well with a dead dog and human waste and menstrual cloths put in it. Then you drink some water from a pool with a dead animal floating in it. So you drink that and you're dipping the fly. You're going to die from this. You're going to die from this stuff. Muslims don't follow it. And so this is just amazing. This is an amazing situation. Everything Muhammad says about the universe that he could possibly get wrong, he gets wrong. Everything that he could get wrong about human reproduction, he gets wrong. Everything he could say about disease and that sort of thing, he gets wrong. He gets everything wrong. And yet it's science that confirms Islam.